Hey, hello everybody, and welcome to another Teal Tinted Glasses. We have a absolutely jam-packed, loaded show for you tonight. So much has happened, so much is obviously still gonna come, and it's gonna be absolutely wild. So I'm gonna get this started really quick. Just quick introductions. You know who we are at this point, I would hope to God anyway. With me always, Mr. Kevin Lacey. Kevin, how are you doing tonight, sir?
I'm great. I'm still battling off people bitching on Twitter about losing Josef Kozenash. So we'll talk about that on the show.
And Mr. Hockey Jerk.
You know what? I'm just glad that for this time around, our podcast is exempt from the expansion draft.
Absolutely, yes.
So,
None of us are going anywhere, thankfully.
Yeah, we're all going to be stuck here. So if you don't like that, I'm sorry, not really. So
I think the first thing before we get into like everything that's happened, I feel like we need an expansion draft like every 5 years at this point. Like just to keep things interested, I think we need one. I don't think the league would need to expand every 5 years because I think that would be bad long term. But let's say you're the Buffalo Sabres and you hit the jackpot, 5 first round picks in a row and you still can't get it right. Maybe we take all your players away and you get to start over.
Yeah, I mean, look, yesterday that like 90-minute stretch with the 40 minutes between the actual deadline and about a half hour to an hour after the deadline when moves were still coming in, that was more exciting than at least the last 2 trade deadlines that we had. Like we did Teal Town live yesterday, and I wasn't kidding when I said welcome to the real trade deadline for 2021 yesterday, because yesterday was a fun 2 hours.
Yeah. I just think it to me it was really incredible because like we had guys who we didn't even know were available getting traded. So it was like actually legitimately exciting. It's not like previous years where it's like, oh yeah, the worst kept secret ever is that player X went to team Y, and it's like, wait, that was the secret? So it was nice to have some mystery and some intrigue and some excitement.
Yeah, good, well said.
Yeah, I agree. All right, so let's get started with the craziness that was the week. And this right here feels like it was an eternity ago. Like this was last season. But Duncan Keith gets traded to Edmonton for Caleb Jones and a conditional third round pick.
I like Duncan Keith. I don't know that I like him at that ticket anymore. And I mean, by all accounts, Caleb Jones wasn't going to stick around in Edmonton. He was out the door anyway. So it's kind of a spoiled fruit, if you will. But still, like it just seems like a bit much to give up for a player like Duncan Keith, who, again, I like Duncan Keith, but at that ticket, I don't know that I would willingly take that on, especially with no retained salary. But, I mean, maybe he's the replacement to Oscar Klefbom. It doesn't seem to me like that works in this timeline, but hey, who knows?
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, the thing that I don't understand is Duncan Keith had 3 possible destinations, four possible places where he wanted to go. I don't understand how the Blackhawks can extract that much out of you for a guy that only wants to go so many places. Like, you would think that would hurt his value more than increase it.
I think that's well put. I'm glad you took that vantage point, Ian, because I feel like a lot of the chatter around the league has been, how can Edmonton take on Duncan Keith without any retained salary? And I'm thinking to myself, sure, I understand that, but Edmonton gave up Caleb Jones and a draft pick for Duncan Keith as well. So like, between those two things, like it feels like people are saying Chicago fleeced Edmonton, and I think I don't know if I believe that, because I think Duncan Keith is still a good NHL defenseman. I don't think he's an elite NHL defenseman by any means. I think that Edmonton got what they needed. So it's kind of like the Sharks with the Adin Hill trade that we'll eventually talk about again later. But ultimately, Edmonton got what they needed and what they wanted, and they gave up an asset they didn't want. So the retained salary's not that big of a deal. From Chicago's side, they trade Duncan Keith, who they possibly could have lost in the expansion draft anyway. So, I mean, I don't know. I don't know. Ian, are you on the side of Chicago totally reaps the benefits on this? Is it balanced? Is not? I feel like it's a lot more balanced than people give it credit to, but I do understand both sides of the complaining here.
I mean, the underlying numbers for Duncan Keith in the last few seasons hasn't been great, but I mean, age is undefeated in the NHL. Like and I think that's the concern, right? I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how Edmonton's going to use him, and I think that's really what's going to eventually bear out whether this was a good trade for Edmonton or not, is how Edmonton plans to use him. If Edmonton's planning, on using him as a 1-2 guy, this is a disaster.
Yeah.
An absolute disaster. But if you don't use him as a 1-2 guy, then you look at the return you gave Chicago and you go, well, am I doing this for a 4-5 guy? A 5-6 guy? Like, is that a lot for a 5-6 guy? Yeah. I mean, and I feel like that's where the value in the trade really has a lot of people, up in arms, I think, because what role is he going to play? If he's playing middle pair minutes, then I think that's probably fine for the value you gave up. But if you plan on playing him like top 2, that's a disaster. I don't think he's a top 2 guy in the league anymore.
Most definitely, and with the Darnell Nurse there, I know Tyson Barrie is about to be departed, but I actually thought he fit in really well. Adam Larsson would be the perfect Sharks defenseman, guys. 1 year you love him, the next year he's the worst hockey player on the face of the freaking earth. But like right now, everyone loves Adam Larsson in Edmonton, and they're crying that he's about to go. And it sounds like he might actually be re-signing. So like, but those are both 2 left side defensemen. So I think Duncan Keith is better than a third pair D. But if that's what ends up happening, he's a damn good third pair D.
I don't hate him on the third pair.
What's that?
I said I don't hate him on the third pair. I don't even know if I'd hate him on the middle pair, depending on what you do for special teams. Like, I think how you deploy him on special teams really makes or breaks that for me.
Yeah.
It's just really interesting to me because I feel like Edmonton, ever since they've, sort of become a quote unquote good team, like I feel like they've just kept around all of their middle of the road kind of defensemen, where you look like, Duncan Keith, Chris Russell, Adam Larsson, like these, I don't know, to me these are all kind of just the same. The guys, like, they sort of top out around the same expectation level. And it's like, I know Edmonton is supposed to be a competitive team in the division, but I'm just, when will guys, are they going to give Bouchard minutes, Broberg, like, are they going to re-sign Barrie? Like, there's just so much confusion with their blue line, where I feel like they have just so many guys who are all kind of that same middle of the road guy. And even, Oscar Klefbom, Kevin, you've obviously mentioned he may not play again this year. Other people are still not sure. And it's just, I don't know. I just feel like they just keep bringing in guys, and, they're not the guys they should probably be bringing in, I don't think.
You're right. They do revolve that door a lot in Edmonton around their defensemen, and that's why they drafted players like Evan Bouchard and Philip Broberg. Now, I understand that Broberg is probably not ready for NHL action. I mean, he's not even played AHL action yet. Right. Evan Bouchard didn't impress me 2 seasons ago with Bakersfield. Obviously didn't get to see him in person this past season. But I would think that Bouchard would be a guy that could take a step forward. Also, Dmitry Samorukov played in the KHL this past season. Wasn't that good in the AHL last year, but had a killer year in the KHL this year. So that's another player in the mix. So they do have some young assets, and yet they still continue to bring in players like Tyson Barrie last year, Duncan Keith this year. Klefbom continues to be the question, and I think that's why Edmonton feels this need to fill in his role, because you already alluded to it. Ken Holland said last year Oscar Klefbom may never play hockey again, and so I don't know why this is even in question. Oh, could he play this year? Not according to Ken Holland last year, so why should we believe it this year? But the ever-changing blue line, that's a problem. Like, that's where you want to have the most stability. Look at the Sharks. Like, the Sharks have one of the least stable, actually, statistically, they have the least stable blue line in the league the last couple of years. And they're just patching things together. Who's going to play with Carlson? Who's going to play with Burns, Martin, Joachim Ryan? I don't know.
Shimmick.
Kanizhov, like they can't figure it out, and Edmonton's the same boat, so they need to stick with some plan, and maybe it's the other parts that need to move around. But
yeah, before we move on, I like Ken Holland. Has there been a GM that has really done worse in the salary cap era? Like for all the good he did in Detroit, but the second that salary cap came in, like it was, and it's not getting any better in Edmonton. Like, I was shocked when he got the Edmonton job, and I feel bad for Edmonton fans because obviously they've got some really, really nice pieces there. You know, you look at McDavid, you look at Draisaitl.
Peter Chiarelli might rival that, but he's the guy that Ken Holland replaced. So obviously Edmonton's just.
And I just thought about, and maybe we'll touch on this, or maybe it'll be next time around, but. You mentioned Tyson Barrie being a bit of a question mark, Kevin. Yeah. I got to tell you right now, if Barrie doesn't return, Edmonton is at the top of my list for Keith Yandle's services, because you think about the type of forwards that Edmonton employs. They need that defenseman who's going to get them the puck on the power play. Yeah. That's Keith Yandle's meal ticket right there.
Yeah, and Yandle actually had... Despite what the Florida Panthers brass would want you to believe, Yandle was actually decent this past season. They just really wanted to get rid of his contract.
Yeah, and that's the thing, right? Is like, in keeping with that same theme, let's say they do bring in Keith Yandle, or even if they keep Tyson Barrie, it's another situation where they're just bringing in all these, like I said, all these guys who are around the same skill level. And I mean, elite number one defensemen don't grow on trees, obviously, but that's kind of where I think they need to focus their efforts, whether it's trade or whether it's, draft and develop, I don't know. But like, I'm, say what you want about Ryan Ellis. I'm surprised Edmonton, maybe they were, but I think they would have been smart to sniff around someone like Ryan Ellis, to be honest with you.
And maybe they did.
I mean, maybe they did.
Know what got rejected.
Right, exactly.
Okay, so moving on, because we got
too much Edmonton.
Too much Edmonton. We gotta keep this puppy moving, or we're gonna be here all night. Obviously the big, like I think this is huge too, and it's crazy because it seems like another drop in the bucket compared to everything else this week. But the Minnesota Wild buyout both Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. Now, I don't know if they realize that just because you sign two guys to the same contract at the same time doesn't mean you have to buy them out at the same time. But they did, and the cap implications here are absolutely insane. Like they're gonna have 3 seasons of cap hell. Next season, not so bad. Combined $4.74 million against the cap next year. Not a big deal. 22-23, $12.7 million against the cap combined. Like that's dead cap space you can't use. And then between 23-24 and 24-25. $14.7 million against the salary cap before 25-29, where it becomes a very reasonable $1.66 million against the cap for the both of them, which really isn't that bad, all things considered. But those, I mean, oof.
I'm just very surprised. Like, the Zach Parise one, I actually understand. I mean, it's not some big secret. You know, Minnesota's been trying to trade him since the trade deadline last year. So that's, it's not some big secret. But the Ryan Suter one really caught me off guard. And obviously Ryan Suter's not the player that he was when the deal was signed, and even a few years ago. But by all accounts, whether you're an eye test person or a possession metrics person or both or neither, Ryan Suter was still a player, in my estimation, worth keeping around. And so I almost wonder if it was, a calculated move by Bill Guerin to be like, I'm tired of the old guard, so I'm going to do my thing now.
With Ryan Suter, I mean, we just talked about it with Duncan Keith. You got Duncan Keith going for Caleb Jones and a 3rd-round pick, and Ryan Suter gets bought out. They're kind of in the same grain as like elite-level defensemen who aren't elite-level defensemen anymore, but they can still hang in the NHL with the right amount of minutes. 16, 17 minutes a night, 18 even. They'll probably be fine. Suter, I thought, played well with Jonas Brodin last year when they were paired together. So that one was very strange to me. And I don't know if you guys caught Michael Russo's article on the Athletic, but
that was a solid read.
Solid read for sure. For those of you who don't have the Athletic, I'll sum up real quick. Parise got bought out, called Ryan Suter, or Ryan Suter called him, one or the other. Suter was like, that's interesting. And then all of a sudden, Suter's phone started ringing while he's on the phone with Parise and thought, well, that's weird. Let me take this. Finds out he gets bought out. Pissed at Bill Guerin, hangs up on Bill Guerin, calls Parise back like, this just got rid of me too. Like, what an article. Go check that out if you have an Athletic subscription. But Ryan Suter, where's he gonna go? I mean, there are definitely plenty of teams who need again a second pair defenseman. What team wouldn't want that? I mean, Tampa Bay had a couple of top pair defensemen and like 6 second pair defensemen on their roster, and Suter is going to continue to get paid by Minnesota, so he might take a nice cap friendly deal with someone else to sign. Parise, the same boat. I think Parise's got less to offer than Suter does, but they're both serviceable players, and I wouldn't be surprised if we see them signing with cup contenders here early on in the offseason.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of teams interested in Ryan Suter, especially because, like you said, a lot of times guys that get bought out, they don't mind signing for less because they're already getting that money from their buyout. Like, that money's coming in regardless. It's not like a coach. A coach gets hired by a new team and they, and that's that. And his old team stops paying him. So I think Ryan Suter is going to have a lot of people interested in his services. And I wouldn't be surprised if a team, like you said, like a Tampa Bay, who, picks up Ryan Suter for league minimum for a year and just goes for it. Or, a team that I really like for Ryan Suter right now is Colorado. I think that's a team
that's a really good one, especially when you talk about like Sam Girard having defensive deficiencies and stuff like that. Pair him, if they keep him, pair him with Ryan Suter. Woo!
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think, and they could even afford to pay him, not what he was getting paid in Minnesota, obviously, but he could still get a pretty decent ticket from a team like Colorado, in my opinion. The thing that baffles me, though, is if you're like the Wild, they looked like they were finally turning a corner. And now, I mean, you don't have Kaprizov under contract yet. Looks like they're not exactly in the same ballpark. Minnesota wants him for a lot more term than he's willing to give up. But if you're Kaprizov, do you want to stay, or is the KHL looking a little more enticing now, knowing that your team is going to be handcuffed? $12 million. Like, that's, depending on how you slice that, that's 2 first line players. That's, potentially your line mate. That's a defenseman.
Minnesota's made some quizzical moves ever since they got eliminated from the playoffs, because I think the Eriksson Ek contract makes sense, but still a little bit of an eyebrow raiser. They let go of Suter, they let go of Parise, and someone brought it up on Twitter. I wish I could give the person credit, but I don't know who. That they have now kept Matt Dumba through 2 expansion drafts at the expense of Alex Tuch, Eric Holla, Zach Parise, and Ryan Suter, all for one Matt Dumba. Now they have protected Cam Talbot over Capo Kakkonen for...
Yeah, that blew my mind.
Kaprizov is, like you said, Ian, very far from signing a contract from what everything has been reported is. So, boy, oh boy, like things are rapidly getting bleak in Minnesota.
And don't get me wrong, like that's a tough division. Rob in the chat, like, is Minnesota rebuilding? Do they have a choice? Are they gonna have a choice with that much dead cap?
Look at the Sharks. I mean, the Sharks don't have dead cap yet, but they have cap that might as well be. They have immovable cap, which is essentially dead cap.
Yeah,
so.
But I mean, that's a lot of money. I mean, again, just going back to my notes here again. I mean, $14.7 million spending on guys not playing for you. That's insane to me.
Ilya Brizgalov will be like, hey, can I come not play for Minnesota?
Well, Minnesota must know something about the salary cap that we don't know.
I hope so.
Like, are we going to see $95 million next year?
I don't think we're going to see cap movement for another 2.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
But for some reason, Bill Guerin seems to be more optimistic than the 3 of us. I'm all for because obviously Bill Guerin, I think this is only his 3rd season on the job. So, I'm all for wanting to kind of put your own stamp on the team and set up your own foundation as opposed to trying to build on somebody else's foundation. But it just seems like really crazy, like you said, Kevin, with Capo Kakkonen being exposed. I mean, I don't see a way Seattle doesn't take, and the Parise Suter thing, and it's... I'm just very interested to see where this all goes, and I don't know. I mean, I really have no words. I thought Minnesota was finally starting to build something and finally, remove themselves from that label of being like the perpetual middle of the road team. And I feel like the last year and a half of work that's been done, I feel like it's just been undone.
Yeah, it's amazing that. I mean, I'm surprised ownership signed off on it for one. Because
a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. Yeah, like I don't know. Happy trails to Pekka Rinne, who renounced his retirement. Who I think Pekka Rinne is like one of my favorite goalies of all time. Guy who could be just absolutely dominant and then absolutely infuriating at the same time. For like, he would just kind of go back and forth. But man, when Pekka Rinne was on, like, I don't think there's, in this era of the NHL, I don't know how many better goalies there were than Pekka Rinne when Pekka Rinne was on.
Absolutely. And for me, the middle aughts, the middle 2000s, that was when I really started to focus my time on watching the Swedish Elitserien, which is now the SHL, and Liga, or SM Liga, which is now Liga in Finland. And the 3 goalies, well, there were 2 goalies. There were Henrik Lundqvist, and there were 3 goalies. Henrik Lundqvist, Tuukka Rask, and Nicklas Backstrom. And when Nicklas Backstrom signed with Minnesota, who we just talked about, Karpat, his team, was left with some guy named Pekka Rinne. Not so bad. Obviously, Pekka Rinne played a little bit in Liga, comes over to North America, plays 1 year in the AHL, and then the next 15 in the NHL. So, boy, oh boy. Pekka Rinne has really done an outstanding job of building his career through a good program in Karpat, but not even being the guy in Karpat, because Backstrom was the guy. And the face of the Nashville Predators, at least goaltending, if not all time right now, is Pekka Rinne. So We joke about his anger management issues during the playoffs and things like that. But I'm with you, Ian. Like I think he's an incredible goalie, great flexibility. He made some just godlike saves
He
in
used to
critical
kill the
moments.
Sharks on regular until that playoff series. He killed the Sharks on the
Yeah.
regular, like
Oh,
just absolutely
absolutely.
killed the Sharks. He had like a
Yeah.
up until that playoff series, I think he had like a 9.41 941 save percentage against the Sharks or something stupid at one point. Like just stone cold Shark killer.
And like being a great mentor for UC Saros, and like so the last couple of years, it's pained me a little bit, having watched essentially Rinne's entire pro career from Europe to now. It's pained me a little bit hearing people saying like, "Oh, Rinne, blah blah blah," and he's not the guy, and he wasn't the guy. It was time for Saros to take over. But I'm happy that Rinne was able to finish out his career with one organization, because I do know that meant a lot to him. He said that in interviews before. So even though there is that enticement of winning a cup elsewhere, I think it's really cool of him to say, you know what, I'm happy with my career. I spent it all with Nashville, so happy trails to Pekka Rinne.
Yeah, and just real quick, like you look at the stats. I mean, he won the Vezina 3 years ago, and he was a Vezina finalist 3 other times in addition to that. So obviously, he's got the receipts to back up his play. But I feel like for me, and maybe you guys agree, maybe you don't, I feel like he's a goalie that I always forgot about. I always feel like there were other goalies who were talked about more than him, and so it's kind of like, oh yeah, Pekka Rinne. I forgot, that he, I was thinking about these other 4 goalies. I totally forgot about Pekka Rinne. And you look at the stats, and it's like, holy crap, like he's a really good goalie. Like, why are people not talking about him more? So I agree with you, Kevin. Obviously Stanley Cups are a big deal, but I think for someone like him, I think it's important to be with that one team his entire career. And okay, maybe he didn't win a Stanley Cup, but the fact that he was willing to just retire with Nashville and not chase a cup, I think it goes to show how important Nashville is to him.
And sorry, I will let you talk, Ian, but the year that you said he won the Vezina 3 years ago as a 35-year-old, no less, that's a year after people were thinking, should Nashville buy out Pekka Rinne? And then he goes and wins the Vezina the very next year. So clearly Nashville was right to hang on to him as long as they did, and eventually became a mentor for Saros, as I said. So what's up, Ian?
And I was just gonna finish on this. Like, okay, it's true, right? Like Pekka Rinne never won Nashville a cup. I don't feel like he ever costed them a cup either.
No.
Right? Like I don't feel like I don't look at any. I'd be interested to get like a Nashville fan's perspective on this. But I don't look at any series and go, well, Pekka Rinne is the reason they didn't move on. Like, this is a team that where offense goes to die.
We talked about that a lot on the last show, and I think when we get to the expansion picks, we'll continue that trend. You're totally right.
We'll continue that trend. Okay, so that brings us to Keith Yandle, who gets bought out by the Florida Panthers. Just give you the quick dollar amounts here. In 21-22, it's going to be he's going to count $2.342 million against the what team? The Panthers salary cap. 22-23, $5.932 million. I mean, that's a little pricey to have against your cap that year. For especially again another team that's contending, like that's a big chunk of change. Where I don't know if the cap's going to do very much. And then 23-25, so 23-24, 24-25, it's $1.232 million chump change. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, like as far as buyouts go, that's totally fine to have against your cap. It's that 1 year 22-23 that's I think really gonna hurt them. I was kind of surprised by this, to be honest. I didn't think I didn't see this coming.
Me neither. It's just weird to me because we kind of talked about it before. Where like Keith Yandle is still an effective player. Like I said, he's really good on the power play, which the players that Florida has, they've got a lot of forwards that can score a lot of goals. You need a guy who can sort of run the show on the power play. So I thought it was quite odd when Florida appeared to be pushing him out, and the Iron Man streak was in jeopardy. But I still like this player. I mean, okay, maybe you could want more from him defensively. I'm willing to cede that point, but I picture Keith Yandle being one of those guys who has a deal signed on day one of UFA just because of what he can bring on the power play. I mean, it's how much is it talked about how important it is to score on the power play, and you have the opportunity to bring in somebody who has made his money doing exactly that. I fully expect him to sign on day one of UFA.
And another point is that so a lot has been made about Chris Driedger being picked by Seattle in expansion. To me, the main purpose of buying out Keith Yandle was to open up a protection slot for Gustav Forsling or maybe Mac Weegar. Anyway, regardless of that, if the Panthers know that Driedger's the guy Seattle is taking, then Yandle's buyout for protection purposes becomes pointless. So because Driedger's going anyway. So whether Forsling or Weegar or whoever are exposed, it doesn't matter. Driedger's their guy. So I think the writing was really on the wall. We know that Joel Quenneville tried to scratch Keith Yandle at the start of the season and break the Iron Man streak, and the fans basically won out and told him, like, what the hell are you doing? Which is amazing because Joel Quenneville is an amazing coach, and yet he gave into what the fans had to say on that. But once the playoffs started, boom, Yandle, press box, bye. Yeah. Like, no worry, no shame, nothing. And for when that happened, I said, okay, Yandle's the only reason he's there is because of the Iron Man streak. Despite the fact that, again, Yandle had a good, not a great, but a good year. And pretty much his whole career has been good years, and he's obviously durable. So, yeah, I think Yandle is definitely valuable for another team. He's not just an Iron Man streak. We've talked a lot, obviously, about Patrick Marleau's Iron Man streak, but let's not forget Keith Yandle has played more games in a row than Patrick Marleau, so Yandle has to drop before Marleau becomes into consideration there anyway. Yandle, I think, still has some wheels to go in his career, so I'm curious to see where he goes. It's his choice at this point, and another player who has made some money. Maybe he takes a lesser deal to go somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, I'm curious to see where Yandle goes. And I think it's a good time that I can kind of mention that we are doing our usual free agent frenzy game. So we're gonna eventually make picks on all of that, and we'll let you know how we did. I plan on doing terrible like I always do, but yeah, so definitely, because I know Rob's asking Yandle to Boston. I haven't really given Yandle much thought yet. I mean, Boston's as good a landing place as any, I guess. But we'll definitely be doing that free agent game that we always do, and we'll let you know how we all do. It'll be great. Jerk, do you have anything on Yandle before I move on?
No, I haven't thought about it either, but that makes some sense to me. Boston.
Yeah, I could see Boston, but my money's still on Edmonton.
Okay, so Dallas Stars, getting away from trades for a second. Dallas signs defenseman Miro Heiskanen to an 8-year, $8.45 million extension. My question is this, because I have not watched enough Dallas recently. I know Miro Heiskanen is a good player. Is he 8 years at $8.45 million good?
I don't think so. Oh, okay.
Ooh.
I think I'll be brief. I would like more from him offensively at that ticket, but he's not the worst guy to have. Like I think he's somebody, maybe he can be worth that amount next year or the year after, but I think more offensively from him, I don't think is too much to ask, but I don't know. I mean, what are you going to go down to at that point? Like, I don't think it would be my preference to sign him to that, but I don't think it's like an egregious signing either. You know what I mean? Maybe it's a bit rich, but it's not like it's not Erik Karlsson getting $11.5 million.
You
All right.
guys know that I'm really stingy about giving out these long-term
I
contracts,
do.
these big money tickets and
Especially
everything.
to a
And
22-year-old.
yeah, and so whatever everything that Jerk just said, I'm in complete agreement. Heiskanen is a defenseman who I believe can match the contract. I do think because of his age and the fact that he has only been in the league 3 years now.
Yeah, 205 career games so far.
Yeah. So I can see this being a situation where this contract does not age well at all in a couple of years because Shane Gostisbehere, who is available on the expansion market, he had that same kind of start to his career, and Philadelphia could not beg anyone to take him these last 2 years. So not at 8 million, obviously. That was more like I think 4.5 million per season. But I think Heiskanen has more to offer than like Gostisbehere has. I think he's a better defensive defenseman. I think he brings plenty of offensive upside. I think he thinks the game very well. He's definitely not a physical defenseman, that's for sure. But I think that Heiskanen, I think that's a solid investment for Dallas, especially because we never know what they want to do with John Klingberg.
Okay.
So if John Klingberg ends up going away, then they're going to need to keep Heiskanen happy as the guy bringing the offense from the back end. But would that have been my go-to 8x8? No. Because to me, you sign him to a 3-year deal at $5 million, and then you let him try and re-sign at 25 years old, and then give him the big money ticket. But that's not the way the NHL is anymore. As
No.
frustrating as it is to say that, everyone wants their money now. I get that, and the way the owners have built this league. The players have the advantage to ask for 8x8 right out of their entry level contract. So, again, if we ever get to another lockout or work stoppage or anything like that, it's the owner's fault for contracts like this.
It always is. I'm just in the chat, and kind of and this is, I think, where I had to ask the question, because if this is what Miro Heiskanen gets, what's Cale Makar gonna get?
I was just gonna say, Kevin mentioned keeping
10
players. I was gonna say, Kevin mentioned, how you keep players happy, and it made me think, well, who's really happy to see this is Cale Makar, because I think when I said before, I would like to see more offensively from Heiskanen to justify this contract. I'm expecting Makar level goals and assists, or at points at least assists for Heiskanen in order to be worth the deal. So,
Like,
I think if you're Makar's agent, you're like, okay, thank you.
Like another defenseman who I really, really, really like. Now, obviously, he's a little bit older, and I need to see what he makes. Because I think like a comparable for is like, would Jacob Slavin be a good comparable for Heiskanen?
Oh, that's. I mean, I don't know. I don't know what Kevin thinks. I think that would be fair.
I think Slavin's a much better defensive defenseman, and I think that Heiskanen brings a lot more offense.
More offense, though, but like, does he bring $3 million more in offense? More?
Okay, if you're gonna put it that way, no.
Right? Like that's what I'm looking at. Like, I look at Jacob Slavin's deal, and I don't know. I think they should be closer together. But we'll see what happens. I mean, it's not. Is it the end of the world? No. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a Dallas fan. I don't care. I don't know. It just seems like a lot, especially when you think of the escalation effect that it have, i.e., guys like Cale Makar. Because like, what does Makar get now? And then I don't even. That's a rabbit hole I don't even want to go down, actually.
Thomas Chabot signing for $8 million. I don't remember if it was 8x8 or 7x8, but Thomas Chabot signing for that really set the frame for this contract, which then sets the frame for Makar's contract.
That is an excellent point.
Yeah.
That is an excellent point. All right, so moving on. We have a three-way trade. Three-way trades are super awesome. So Nashville, I'll give you the end result. Nashville gets Cody Glass and Philip Myers. Philadelphia gets Ryan Ellis. And Vegas gets Nolan Patrick.
I don't know what the hell Vegas is doing. Like,
Go ahead.
I can understand them giving up on Cody Glass if it's in return for a legitimate top 6 NHL center. We have not seen that from Nolan Patrick yet, and you know, there's been a lot of injury issues with him as well, and so it's just, you know, I'm not going to sit here and say he's not a good player, but with the injury history and the slow rate of development for a second overall pick, and maybe you can put the two together, but I feel like if I'm Vegas, I would rather just hold on to Cody Glass. Or at the very least, if you are going to trade for Nolan Patrick, you say to Nashville, hey, you need an exempt player. You're going to give me a little bit more.
I think, you know, was it last show or the show before where we're talking about Cody Glass and how he needs to take a step forward, and it won't be with Vegas now, so I kind of got a chuckle when this trade happened. Nolan Patrick, the one thing that I can say to him, obviously he had the head injury that cost him over a season of play, but I think that Nolan Patrick, you guys know I'm not a big Peter DeVore fan, and that's putting it mildly. But I do think that Nolan Patrick would thrive in a Peter DeVore system, more of a defensive-oriented system, because Patrick's got, I think, untapped offensive ability, kind of like how William Karlsson had untapped offensive ability, but was more of a second, third line defensive forward. And I think Patrick can do that role, and DeBoer looks for guys like that. So I think that this can work. But obviously William Karlsson was thriving under Gerard Gallant, not Peter DeBoer. So that comparison's a little wishy-washy. Nevertheless, I think Vegas needs more offense from the forward end. I think Glass brings more offense as a forward than Nolan Patrick does. So yeah, that one's. It's funny because this is the Ryan Ellis trade, but there are like so many quizzical parts to this whole thing that it feels weird passing a judgment right now, but that's what we're here to do. And I'm with you guys. From a Vegas perspective, I don't get it. I think that Nashville and Philly definitely got the better end of this whole thing.
I think from Vegas, I'll start with Vegas quick, and then I'll move on to the other teams. The thing that concerns me if I am a Vegas Golden Knights fan is that this team should be set to contend for a decent amount of time. But every knee-jerk move from this, I feel like it chips away at that window, and it just closes it a little bit more and a little bit more. And maybe you don't notice it right away, but it's going to get to a point where that window is going to close, and they're going to look around and be like, what the hell just happened?
Oh, that sounds like the Sharks.
Because this is a team that I appreciate the going all in gusto to win now. Like I do appreciate that, but it comes at a cost, and Vegas has used a lot of the capital they've built up for a lot of win now moves. They have to win, because if this team doesn't win soon, they're gonna salary cap themselves right out of their window. I like Nolan Patrick for them because I agree he should thrive if he can stay healthy. He should thrive in a Peter DeBoer system. Vegas definitely needs help down the middle. But this is... I like Cody Glass too. And I think this is... I'll give Vegas credit, man. They always swing. And I think if, you kind of, for better or worse, they always swing. And and for a team that's as good as they are, you have to respect that to a point. But I would be nervous for them now as a Sharks fan. They can slam that window shut as quick as they can if they really want to. I don't care. But as a hockey fan, as a person that comes on here and pretends I know stuff about hockey, it concerns me. I love the trade for Philadelphia. Philadelphia getting Ryan Ellis is exactly the kind of guy they need. This is a team where we boasted about how good this defense core was going to be, and it hasn't really panned out. A lot of, some of their guys haven't really become the guys we thought they were going to be, other than, I think, Provorov. I think Provorov's legit. The rest of them, not so much. But Ryan Ellis, he's a legit guy. And I think that he solves a definite hole in that blue line, and that's a tough division. The Metro's no joke. But I like Philadelphia a lot more right now than I did, before this trade happened. And Nashville's an interesting one. I don't know what Nashville's doing. I'm kind of at a loss for what they're doing. But I don't hate it. I like Cody Glass. I think Cody Glass is a guy that that still is going to be a player in this league. I think he's going to be a good player. But, man, Nashville's where offense goes to die. And Cody Glass at the NHL level has had trouble producing offense. So, I mean, small sample size for sure. But I don't know about Nashville in this deal. But I love it for Philly.
Yeah, I think Philly is the clear winner here. I mean, just like I said, getting a defenseman of Ryan Ellis' stature, for Nolan Patrick, who, again, like I said before, good player, but he's not met the expectations that I think a lot of people had for him up to this point. And again, same thing, Phil Myers, good defenseman, but I would say and this is just my opinion, maybe you guys disagree, I don't think he was originally one of those guys that Philadelphia was thinking, oh, okay, this is going to be one of our big defensemen. Mm-hmm. I always thinking Gostisbehere, Provorov, Sanheim, guys like this, and Phil Myers kind of slipped through the cracks, so to speak. So to be able to use him and another piece to get someone like Ryan Ellis, I agree with you, Ian. I think it was big, swing at and hit of a home run. You're talking about swinging, and same thing for Nashville. I mean, getting Cody Glass, it's nice, but again, it is where offense goes to die, and we've seen that time and time again with all these players, who have gone there. Duchesne, Johansson, Forsberg, and the only guy who that moniker didn't apply to, they traded away. So I'm with you. I don't know what Nashville's doing, but at the end of the day, they still have Yossi. They still have Matthias Ekholm. So downgrading, so to speak, Ellis from Phil Myers, it's not the worst move ever, I don't think.
Okay, so I'm going to skip a couple things here. Oh, go ahead.
They downgraded their defense, but they were able to upgrade their offense in a key area, which is, they need any kind of offense whatsoever. And I'm going to give a hat tip to Tom Callahan of Talking Puck, who used to be the Nashville Predators play-by-play announcer, actually, for a good chunk of time. And he was saying Cody Glass, really his foot speed is what keeps him from thriving in the NHL, and I can definitely see that. But I'd like to see what he can really do at the NHL level, because he's been great at the AHL level. And from Philly fans' perspective, it sounds to me like they're a little lukewarm on this trade, because some people believe Phil Myers is a poor man's Ryan Ellis. Now, certainly size-wise, they're different. Ryan Ellis, I think, is 6 feet. Phil Myers is 6'5". Phil Myers does have some untapped offensive ability, but generally he's a big punishing defenseman. Ellis is definitely not that. But I think given the tools that Nashville already has on the blue line, I think Myers complements that very well. My one concern from Philly's perspective is that they're kind of like Toronto. They always have a ridiculously high bar for whichever acquisitions they have. So if Ryan Ellis does not have a great year one or start to year two, we're already going to be hearing about buyout Ryan Ellis, all this garbage. So I I think Ryan Ellis is the best player in this deal.
Oh,
But
by far.
there is a little buyer beware in the sense of like media created buyer beware on this.
Okay, so I'm going to do one more thing where I want to kind of go in detail, and the other things will kind of just scratch the surface here. But I need someone to also... There's something else I need people to explain to me here. The New York Islanders trade Nick Leddy to the Detroit Red Wings for Richard Panik and a 2021 second, which is pick number 52. Detroit is retaining 50% of Panik's salary until 22-23. Leddy has 1 year remaining, $5.5 million AAV, $7 million in actual money. I remember last week where I kind of said, yeah, I think the legend of Lamoriello is kind of overstated. He just did this to Steve Yzerman. I'm an idiot. I'm an idiot.
Well, we both, I think. I know I did for sure when I heard this trade. I thought it was Leddy and a second to Detroit.
Right. I was like, oh, Detroit must really want that second. And I'm like, oh, no, that's not the way this worked.
Right. And usually that's how a Steve Yzerman trade works, is he gets the extra pick. That's how he got Mark Stahl last year. You think Steve Yzerman cares about Mark Stahl being on Detroit? No. He just wanted that second round pick that came along with it. And I thought Nick Leddy was kind of the same way. I guess it's cool for Detroit because this is the sign that now they want to actually start building in the rebuild.
Yeah.
Is Nick Leddy that guy? I don't know, because for the last 4 years, we've been hearing about how Nick Leddy is the odd man out on the island. So I think he's better than that. I think he's better than him constantly being on the trade block. I think he does have good offensive ability, and I think paired with the right defensive defenseman, hey, Ryan Suter, who knows? He can really be kind of a second pair A defenseman. But with Detroit's current climate, I'm curious. I think this is going to need some more moves involved, because right now just bringing in Leddy for a second round pick does not make sense for Detroit.
I don't know. I think it's a decent move. I mean, to your point, Kevin, Leddy is an NHL defenseman, so it does appear that they are starting to build and actually want to fill an NHL team. And I've been seeing people say, oh, same thing you were saying before, where it's like, oh, Leddy's the worst player who ever wore an Islander sweater, and it's like,
I think that's far-fetched.
No, that's what I'm saying. And I think, I don't think he's all of the sudden like a number one defenseman or ever was, but he's a good middle pair defenseman, for a team like Detroit who wants to start building, as you said. But even then, if it doesn't work out, at the trade deadline next year, Steve Yzerman is going to trade him to a team that is desperate for a defenseman and willing to pay at the very least what Detroit gave up, because they are desperate. So I don't see a way where Detroit is really the loser here, because they either are going to get an asset for him at the trade deadline that's comparable to what they gave up, or hey, they can keep him and it works out and they have an NHL defenseman on the roster.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's if you look at teams, if you look at cap friendly, there's obviously Seattle has a complete blank canvas right now, but right next to that is Detroit. Detroit has so many guys that are up right now. So it's going to be interesting to see. I agree. It's going to be interesting to see what comes next, because Detroit has room to make a ton of moves to, decide what this team's going to be. And maybe by the end of the summer, we'll be like, oh, well, that Nick Leddy trade doesn't look so terrible right now. It just seems like a lot. to not only like, because I mean the Islanders gain a ton of cap space from it. Plus, I mean Richard Panik, he's a serviceable guy. He's not going to blow the doors off. But I think, you know, having him at, you know, 1.6 I think for 2 years, that's not bad. I like the deal for the Islanders a lot more than I do for Detroit. It's a weird one, but I guess with Steve Yzerman, sometimes you just got to trust the process, and I think Steve Yzerman's probably earned that. So I'm curious to see what happens next. So maybe we'll revisit this and he'll be a genius. We'll see. A couple things I want to hit really quick.
Once upon a time was traded for a second-round pick. What the hell is Tampa Bay doing? Oh, 2 Stanley Cups later.
A couple things really quick. Colorado traded Ryan Graves to New Jersey for Mikhail Maltsev and a 2021 second, which is pick number 61 in this year's draft. I like that pickup for New Jersey. Colorado, obviously, again, like a lot of teams making moves to prevent Seattle from taking a guy for free. That's not a bad return for a guy that you probably were going to lose for free. I think Colorado's still going to lose a player, but I think losing Ryan Graves for nothing might be far worse than the player that they're probably going to lose for nothing.
I like it for both teams. I think, to your point, Ian, Colorado gets assets for guys they were going to lose. And same New Jersey has been, I feel like, the most unforgettable team ever. So, you know, they finally get a player who can play for them. Again, somebody who's an NHL caliber player. And I don't think New Jersey is going to challenge for a divisional title anytime soon, but you got to be competitive and you have to be relevant. And, you know, last couple of years, New Jersey's at least tried to do that. So I give them credit for that.
I'm actually concerned about this deal for New Jersey. I think Ryan Graves was able to thrive under Colorado's system because Ryan Graves toiled around in the minors for a long time. And the last 2 seasons, he's led the league in plus minus and proven himself to be an NHL caliber defenseman. But I think that some of his stats and play were helped by the fact that Colorado always had the puck. And I don't think he's a bad defenseman, but in going to New Jersey, who never seems to have the puck, I could see Ryan Graves getting in over his head and this deal turning very sour for the Devils. So I think getting a second-round pick and a prospect for Colorado and being allowed to then protect Devon Taves in expansion, I think this is Colorado's win all the way.
That's a good point.
That's fair. So Pittsburgh Penguins trade Jared McCann to the Toronto Maple Leafs for Philip Hollander and a 7th-round pick. Then they exposed Jared McCann in the expansion draft. So it's an interesting move. I should point out, though, that I think we brought this up earlier, that the ask for that Seattle has to take the player that they want, that you want them to take, is the ask is a 1st and a 3rd. Philip Hollander in a 7th is a hell of a lot better than a 1st and a 3rd.
Well, and you know what? And Kevin knows how much I like Jared McCann.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So when I saw that go down, and again, we don't know what did or did not happen.
Right.
But when I saw Jared McCann go for that, immediately I'm thinking, why were the Sharks not sniffing around this?
Mm-hmm.
It was Detroit not sniffing around that.
Yeah, and like I said, Kevin knows I love Jared McCann. I would have been, oh man, I just think it's a really good trade for Toronto. I mean, you know, as good as their top 2 lines are, their depth has been not so great. You know, they've had to add to it every year. You know, whether it's you're bringing in Nick Foligno, Wayne Simmons, Jason Spezza, these guys. So I'm thinking, man, they're going to get Jared McCann, and they're going to have like that secondary scoring that's going to step up for him. And then to your point, Ian, they exposed him. So, and
guys,
like,
I think the reason that they exposed Jared McCann there, though, is to try to deter Seattle from picking Travis Dermott, who they surprisingly exposed.
Is it Dermott or Kerfoot?
I think it's. I understand why Toronto did the 8 skater method because they have a handful of defensemen that
Yes.
they want to keep. But I've been saying forever, it's like, okay, you're very obvious that Morgan Riley, Jake Muzzin, these are your left-handed defensemen. Like, you need to give guys like Travis Dermott, Rasmus Sandin, like, you need to give these guys minutes or you need to trade them elsewhere. And so for them to just, sort of put their eggs in this defense basket, which I think they need to subtract from only to expose a couple of quality forwards, I don't know. I don't get it, and I think if I were them, I would have, I don't know. But it's just very weird to me to trade for Jared McCann, who is a very good player, I think, and then expose him. But it's like, yeah, but we kept Justin Hall. It's like,
Yeah.
Okay. Like, again, Justin Hall's a good defenseman, but Justin Hall's grow on trees. You can find those players.
Justin Hall. I just talked about Ryan Graves, how I think he benefited from the system that he was in. I think Justin Hall's the same way. You put Justin Hall on Boston, and I think he fails miserably.
Mm-hmm.
And Boston's a better team than Toronto.
Yeah.
Here's what I want to bring on this trade.
Okay.
Kasperi Kapanen was drafted by Pittsburgh and then traded to Toronto. Philip Hollander was traded by Pittsburgh, but drafted by Pittsburgh and traded to Toronto for Kapanen, and then Hollander gets traded to Pittsburgh. And just stop, Pittsburgh and Toronto. You're trading the same pieces over and over and over. I cannot wait for Jared McCann to become a Pittsburgh Penguin next year.
It's amazing.
Well, and that's not the first time they've done that either. I can remember, around the time of the Phil Kessel trade, I believe Daniel Winnick and a second got traded for each other twice by Pittsburgh and Toronto. Like, it's in their DNA. But I saw somebody say, what if Toronto trades McCann back to Pittsburgh after the expansion draft? And it's like, well, not really going to work now because you exposed him. If I'm Seattle, and we'll get into it, I'm Seattle, I'm taking Jared McCann.
There's a lot there to like.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that.
Deuces Shoeless in the chat asking for a question from Mr. Hockey Jerk. Hockey Jerk, what is your Sharks trade for Jared McCann?
A 7th round pick and Yoel Shellman.
There you go.
No, but I think, I don't know that I would give up a second for him, but if you look at, I don't know, I'm trying to roll through my head and think of some of the trades we've seen, but like if you, I more than Pittsburgh, I'll tell you that. I think you start that conversation, especially Jared McCann could be your third center, your third left winger, your second left winger. He's a very versatile player. I would have given up maybe I'm trying to think. One of these guys on the Barracuda who've just been toiling around, maybe.
Right. You trade that with like a 6th.
Yeah, I was going to say maybe you do something, I don't know, like a Joachim Blichfeld and like a 4. I don't know.
I think that would definitely get it done. Jared McCann's bounced around a little bit. He's another one of those players who I talk about. Like, I wonder what goes on off the ice, because Jared McCann bounces around an awful lot for the amount of versatility and the tools that he brings on the ice.
I'm glad you brought that up, because there was a thing. I saw something on Twitter, and it was apparently from somebody who was in the Florida Panthers organization. When was it Florida when Jared McCann was in Florida, right?
He's on Florida, yes.
Yeah, and I think he said something along the lines of, it's not Jared. That's one of those things where Jared McCann is just kind of like a victim of a changing of focus from the ownership group, and it doesn't really reflect on Jared McCann at all. But it's understandable why that's the first thing people go to. Oh, well, he's been on a lot of teams. That guy must be absolute cancer. Jared McCann, I mean, he played here for 3 years, and I never heard a peep of him being
I was gonna say he's one of your guys, you know. And I mean, like you know, he's like you said, Ian. You know, Vancouver, Florida, Pittsburgh, now Toronto, assuming he stays there. He has bounced around a lot, but like you said, I think it just ends up to being a situation where it's like, yeah, you're a good player, but you're not as good as the players we want to keep. And so I feel like he ends up becoming a victim in that respect. You know what I mean? Like I think, like I think he was run out of Vancouver unjustly. I mean,
absolutely.
I still think about that trade. Like you gave up McCann for Eric. You gave up McCann, you know, less than 2 years after you drafted him for Eric Goodbranson. Like again, like I said with Justin Hall, Eric Goodbransons grow on trees, and you know, and same thing. Florida kind of ran him out the door as well. But you know what? You look at where he's been, and okay, maybe he's not gonna wow you with the offense. You know, he's not a 60-point guy, at least not yet. But he's wherever he's gone, he's played well. And as I said, he's a versatile guy. He, you know, was the Penguins' third line center and also played on the wing when Malkin was hurt. He jumped up, played second center. He played on the wing with Crosby. Like 32 GMs would kill to have a player with that level of versatility.
For sure. Last thing on the list, Barclay Goodrow, former Shark, goes to the New York Rangers for a 2022 7th round pick. Obviously, that is just his negotiating rights before people are like, man, Doug Wilson got a first and New York Rangers only gave up a 7th. Like, yeah, no, that's not how this works.
Well, and real quick, word on the street is that Goodrow and the Rangers are close to an extension, and it could be something in the neighborhood of a 6-year extension.
That's bonkers.
Which is, yeah.
What are you guys thinking on that? Are you thinking like $3 million a year?
I was gonna say when I read 6-year extension, the immediate comparable that came to my mind was Calle Yarncroke. You know, at his deal, maybe a little more than $2 million, but somewhere like that. Like if you're gonna give him 6 years, it's got to be a lower number. It's like if the Rangers were to be like, yeah, $5 million, I take it. You know,
Martin Lapointe Jr. Yeah. No, there were actually a lot of ex-Sharks in the news over the last couple of days. I mean, obviously the Adin Hill trade, Barclay Goodrow and Nick DeSimone were both traded in separate deals to the Rangers and both impending UFAs, but I think both will end up re-signing there. Frederick Claesson re-signed with Tampa Bay. Remember, he was a Shark. I completely forgot till he lifted the cup. There were a couple other guys as well, and we will. Don't worry, folks. This is called Teal Tinted Glasses, and it's not because Ian's got teal stuff in the background and I'm wearing a shirt. We will actually speak about the Sharks at some point.
It's next. Here's my thing on Barclay Goodrow, and I'm going to make people angry because I know people love Barclay Goodrow. I love Barclay Goodrow, but here's the problem I have with Barclay Goodrow. Barclay Goodrow
didn't give it his all with the Barracuda. That's my problem with Barracuda.
my problem, not my problem with Barclay Goodrow per se. I just think he's going to get massively overpaid. I don't think he's the guy on that line that you should pay. Blake Coleman's the guy on that line that you should pay, not Barclay Goodrow. And that's what I'm just curious to see. I don't. Again, I like Barclay Goodrow. I'm happy for him. He won a Stanley Cup twice. Good on him, right? But I'm just nervous the team, and it's not going to be the Sharks, but I think a team's going to pay him more than they probably should for a guy who he's not he's the part. He's not the sum of the parts. That's my opinion on that.
I think it's well said, and Tampa Bay potentially could lose their entire third line because I've got Yanni Gourde going to Seattle in expansion unless Tampa pulls a side deal with it, which I think is very well possible.
I will.
I think Tampa Bay should, but I got Yanni Gourde going. Blake Coleman should get paid in free agency, and Barclay Goodrow is already a Ranger for right now. So, wow.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk some Sharks because I mean we've been here long enough. I mean we got enough to cover. Okay. So let's start with Obviously, in order to get compliant for the expansion draft, the Sharks needed to sign a forward. Dylan Gambrell gets a 1-year deal for $1.1 million. What say you?
I think it's here's a little bit extra for helping us out. And look, it's not a big secret. I mean, I'm a fan of Dylan Gambrell. I generally like him as a player, but $1.1 million, that's pretty incredible for a fourth line center. So I think it's an inflated number just based on the fact that they need a forward to expose. That said, maybe Gambrell, he obviously from 2 years ago to last year, he obviously improved. Maybe he improves again this year and he's worth the contract. But I would say right now, probably not. But I don't know. It's for 1 year. So even though the dollar amount is a bit suspect to me, I'm not really going to, I'll still sleep 8 hours tonight. So
it's a shade over 1 million, and to me, it's only a couple $100,000 more than what I probably would like him to be signed for. But you also have to consider that Gambrell is exposed in the expansion draft, so you're also trying to add a little bit of extra dollars to convince Seattle to not take him in the draft. And then, as you said, Gambrell's camp knew that, I'm sure they knew, that the Sharks needed to sign someone or bring in someone to get compliant for the expansion draft. So you asked for a little bit more. That's how Gambrell ends up with $1.1 million. It's not the best. It's not the worst. And if Gambrell doesn't meet even a $1.1 million contract, he probably ends up not being tendered an offer next year. So 1 year, I'm fine with that.
I'll say, Gambrell's agent, Scott Norton, who, cheap plug, follows me on Twitter, but whatever.
A WCW wrestler?
No, Gambrell's agent, who follows me on Twitter, but that's beside the point.
Oh, wow.
Good handiwork on his part, I would say. Because, like you said, Kevin, he could have easily just been like, well, you know what? They want to give us a QO. I think we should take it. But no, he, I'm assuming he told the Sharks, you need him. More money.
Mm-hmm.
So,
and they do.
Yeah, props.
Yeah, I'm going to circle back to this after we talk about the trade too. The term's fine. Like 1 year, whatever. The money's a little much, but is it so much that I think like we should burn down SAP? No. Like Jerk said, am I going to sleep tonight? Fine. Yeah, of course I am. Like it's not that worth getting bent out of shape. And maybe Seattle takes him. I don't know. I don't think so, but I think you made him. I think he's a little less appealing at that dollar amount. Yeah. But it's not completely egregious. And but I am going to circle back to this because I have a bigger point that I'm going to make later. So do I love the money? No. Do I absolutely? Is it from on a scale of 1? On a scale of 1 to Martin Jones, how angry am I? At 3. But yeah, I don't know. So moving on. Obviously, this is a trade that happened yesterday. The Sharks traded the 2020 second round pick and Josef Kozanash to Arizona for Adin Hill. Go ahead, guys.
I was going to say this is Kevin's topic.
What makes you think that? Was it because I said it on the last episode of Teal Tinted Glasses? Or was it because I dropped the mic on Twitter about this?
I was going to say it's because you walked up you walked up to the porta potty that is Sharks Twitter and you threw a grenade in there. So I say floor is yours, Kevin.
All right. Here, if you really want like my full analysis on the Adin Hill trade, I encourage you to have a look at the Teal Town USA YouTube library or our website, tealtownusa.com, and have a look at our Teal Town live show that we did yesterday recapping this very trade. But I think for my short points, I think that Adin Hill has a lot to offer for the Sharks. Do I think he's the guy? No, I don't think he's the guy. I don't think he's the solution, but I think he is a step in the right direction, and there are more pieces that need to be added, more changes that need to be made in order to right the ship. But I do think that Adin Hill, being a 25-year-old goalie with nothing left to prove in the minor leagues and ready to take a step forward in the NHL, isn't that what you want for a roster that has Logan Couture, a contract expiring Tomas Hertl, Evander Kane, Erik Karlsson, Brent Burns, like Vlasic, even Martin Jones? Like, these players are all here on the Sharks to win right now. Whether they can or not, I think we're all in disagreement on that. But with Adin Hill, you've got a guy, he hasn't proven that he can't do it. He just hasn't proven that he can do it either at the NHL level. So give the guy a shot. If he falters, whatever. Too bad, we move on to the next. Because by the time that Adin Hill falters, that's when you're going to be wanting to bring in another goalie anyway, because in theory, that's when the Sharks will be ready to start contending again. Or the flip side is, when the Sharks are ready to start contending again, Adin Hill is the man and ready to play playoff games. Like, you have to let him settle into the starting role. If Hill really is the starter of the future for the Sharks, you have to let him settle into that role. I do have a concern that because the Sharks have been a dumpster fire defensively the last 2 years, maybe Hill doesn't get a fair assessment because he's facing 40 shots a night from this porous defense. Yeah. That's my big concern. And then it truly becomes, what are you doing, Doug Wilson? This guy can't stop a puck, blah, blah, blah. He's Martin Jones light, something to that effect. So there is an upside, there is a downside to all of this, but we have to let it play out. So Sharks fans, calm down. You wanted another goalie. The Sharks got another goalie. He's got upside. So it wasn't a 36-year-old goalie that we picked up from unrestricted free agency or something like that. Yes, it cost us a second-round pick, but we have plenty of prospects. We're bringing in more prospects. So if the second-round pick that we traded is the end of the world, then I'm sorry, you will never, ever be satisfied as a Sharks fan.
I don't think Sharks fan and satisfied belong together, personally. No, Kevin, you're absolutely right. I mean, like, you made the point, I made the point, where it's like, draft a player with that second, and hopefully they make a save for you in 2028, or trade it, see what you got in Adin Hill. And it's a small sample size, incredibly small sample size. But the last 3 years, Adin Hill has played better than Martin Jones.
Yeah.
I mean, that's science. Like, that's a real thing that happened. So maybe you give him more starts and it doesn't work out. But what if you give him more starts and it does work out? So, and Vince G bringing up the high danger save percentage, which I thought was interesting that Doug Wilson actually mentioned that in the media availability, I guess he knows that the Sharks are notorious for allowing those. So good self-awareness.
So here's my thing, right? Like, did I love this trade when I heard it? No. I think my reaction was, this team is run by morons.
Your reaction to my proposal of acquiring Adin Hill last week was pretty lukewarm.
Oh, I was not excited at all. Here's the problem, and this I know, and me and Kevin differ on this, and I appreciate that, and I differ on this with a lot of Sharks fans. My play is you have to buy out Martin Jones, and so getting my play, I always thought that Josef Kozenac was going to back up whoever the Sharks brought in. Josef Kozenac going out and Adin Hill coming back in for a second makes me a little nervous, because is Martin Jones staying? Because if Martin Jones is staying and you're only upgrading your backup or your 1B, which I think is what Adin Hill caps out as, a 1B, I don't know if that's worth the capital that you just sent out, right? Like, that's the thing. And for me, I need the other shoe to fall. I need to know what what the plan is. If this is just Adin Hill and Martin Jones next year, I think this is an awful deal. Because I don't think you got. I wasn't big on the upside of Josef Kozinash. But I don't think Adin Hill's significantly better that you needed to chip out Kozinash and a second to make that switch, right?
Right.
It really depends on what happens with Martin Jones. If Martin Jones is bought out and the plan is still to bring in another goalie, fine. That's great. You know what? A better tandem. I have no faith in Martin Jones at this point. Now, I understand the argument to not buy out Martin Jones. We're going to discuss that in a minute. But for me, and this comes back to the Gambrell thing, because again, even if you buy out Martin Jones and you do everything I want, you bring in another goalie and they tandem, it's an okay trade. It's an okay signing. Okay adds up over time. It's kind of like what I said, like with Vegas kind of just continuously swinging to try and hit their window. It's death by 1,000 cuts. And I think that's what really concerns me with Doug Wilson, is it's not like I think the last time I thought he hit something out of the park was coincidentally the Barclay Goodrow trade. Absolutely hit that out of the park. A first round pick for Barclay Goodrow? Stupid good. I'd do that 100 times. But other than that, the times where I feel like Doug Wilson absolutely murders it, man, that's getting few and far between. Far less frequent than it used to be. And to me, that's what concerns me as a Sharks fan.
Excellent points. Jerk, do you have anything to add on this?
No, I think you guys did a pretty solid job at explaining it. The one thing I did kind of latch on to was, Ian, you were saying people sort of go back and forth on whether or not you need to buy out Martin Jones. And the thing is, I agree with you. The Sharks do need to buy out Martin Jones, because whether any of us like it or agree with it, to Kevin's point, the Sharks are built to try to win the Stanley Cup. That they're not built to win, they're built to try. And you don't try to win a Stanley Cup when you have the 62nd best goalie out of 62.
That's
just
fair.
saying.
Yeah, no. It's a great point. I do think that it is surprising to me that Kozinash was included in the deal. But I did talk about yesterday. I'm really not going to go down this hole, but I did say, if Hill becomes the guy, then Kozinash is irrelevant. And I also think that from an Arizona standpoint, Kozinash was exposed, and I actually think Seattle's taking him. So Kozinash is a complete moot point from this trade. So I think it's just straight up Hill for the second, and the Sharks used Kozinash as a sweetener just to say, hey, here's who you can lose in the expansion draft, so you don't have to lose anyone else, kind of thing. I do like your point, Ian, about Jones being, Jones and Hill both being 1Bs, basically. Like, who's gonna take the reins here? And if Hill doesn't take the reins, especially if Hill only gets maybe 20 games this year, like if Jones ends up starting 60 games, this trade is a failure. Like, this trade is contingent on Hill playing at least half the games for the Sharks this year, if not more. Like, I think 50 would be a good number for a guy coming into his first full-time NHL gig. Can the Sharks survive on 30 games of Jones? Maybe, if Jones gets it together between the ears, because I really think that Jones's problem is his mental game. I think he has the athletic ability and the positioning and the wherewithal to stop the puck, but I think he is mentally fragile beyond belief, and I think that's why we've seen him falter. I think that he's heard the outcries from the fans and from within the organization and from teammates and the media and everything, and I think he's let it all get into his head, and I don't know if he's ever coming back from that. And that's why the Sharks need to get Adin Hill as many games as they can. But you're totally right in that if Jones ends up beating out Hill for playing time, then this trade really is a failure. I don't think the Sharks will let it get to that. But if it does, oh boy.
Go ahead.
I was just we obviously are not going to get into this, but you said it's more Jones's mental game than anything with his actual performance. I do agree. I think mental game has a lot to do with it, but there's a couple things of Jones's positioning, specifically his urgency in making a save that make me want to disagree with you. Like I think he is and I don't know what changed, but I think his, whatever term you want to use, his play, his performance, I think it's a flawed model because too many times, and how many times do we see, Jones makes these insane saves and then lets in a beach ball from the blue line. And I think, mental game is a part of it. I think if you're looking at goaltenders like cars, I think it's a flawed model, and I would return it to the dealership.
Look at the basketball player. I don't know. I don't follow basketball, so I don't know the name of the player. But the basketball player for the Milwaukee Bucks had this amazing interview the other day, where they were talking about living in the past, living in the present, and living in the future, and anticipating your upcoming games, your upcoming performances. And I think that talking about Martin Jones, maybe he gets too wrapped up in, I made this big save. Oh crap, I forgot to make the next one. Like,
but Kevin, 2016.
I still make that trade. All day because I'm sorry, but trading the pick that became Trent Frederick for Martin Jones.
I will. You know what? And look at. I mean, there doesn't get to be a guy who hates Martin Jones much more than I do, but that was the market at the time. Like, look at the other trades that were made at that time. That was the market.
Well, and you called it, Ian, way back in. I'm like 80% sure on the Pucknology free agency show when the Sharks acquired Martin Jones. I'm pretty sure you said, "Don't be surprised if this doesn't go the way we want it to." You were like the first person to say, "Hey, whoa, let's pump the brakes on the Jones is elite conversation."
Oh, I mean, there was not much of a sample size there. I mean, here's the thing, right? And like, I understand, like, just because I'm seeing a lot, obviously, in the chat here about, obviously it's like you have to buy out Jones because you can't, like, and this is the problem, like, and this is why I'm so set on the fact that Jones is getting bought out, because and maybe I'm the idiot because I take what this team says at face value. And maybe that makes me the idiot, right? Because, like, I agree, it's like, if you're trying to sell the fact that you're going to try and be a playoff team in this division next year, I can't see how you do that, Jones. If your plan is to suck, then whatever. Then the keep Jones argument makes complete sense at that point. If your plan is to suck, sure. Then at that point, the big argument for why you don't buy Martin Jones is don't turn a 3-year problem into a 6-year problem. I get that if that's your plan. But I don't think that's the plan, which means you have to buy out Jones.
I think your argument is spot on.
Right? Like, and I don't think you can't bury him. Like, I've seen on Twitter, like, burying him in the minors. That's ridiculous.
Good luck. Enjoy your 900,000 of cap space.
Well, here's the thing, right? So here's your Martin Jones buyout. 21-22, it costs you $1.9 million against the salary cap. 22-23, $2.416 million against salary cap. 23-24, $2.9. A little rich, but I mean, compared to some of these other buyouts we just read off, peanuts. And then from 25 to 27, it's $1.6 million. Now, the Sharks obviously do have a lot of heavy contracts they can't move and not a lot of cap flexibility, so I get the argument. But if you were to bury him, you're in 21-22, you're spending an additional $2.709 million against the cap. 22-23, 2.209 million additional in addition to what you would have spent in the buyout. Like, it doesn't make any sense. 23-24, 1.709 in addition to what you would have spent in the buyout. And then obviously you save the 1.6 in the last 3 years of what would be the buyout. Like,
well,
it just, you have to buy him out or you have to play him. There's no, well, we'll just stuff him in the minors because it's only, it's what, 1.125 this year million you can hide in the minors. That's it.
Well, and also too, the thing that kind of kills me is, and there's all this talk, Martin Jones, it's rotten to the core. It's a spoiled fruit. We need to get rit of it. Just, But then those same people are saying, send him to the CUDA to develop and push Melnichuk. It's like, you want this rotten fruit mentoring your goalie in the AHL? Like,
I don't want him stealing starts.
That's what I'm saying. Yeah. And it's the same people who say, the Sharks are going to suck this year, and then they get pissy when they lose. It's like, they proved you right. What's the problem?
No doubt.
That's kind of changing direction, but that's where I went with my Kozhinash trade, or my Kozhinash tweet in the afternoon yesterday, which is, why is everyone up in arms about Josef Kozhinash being traded? 3 years ago, no one, except for, I think, me and maybe his family, knew who the hell he was. And then the next year it was trade Jones and Dell. He should be the Sharks starter after having a half good year in the AHL. And then the next year it was, he's trash, bring in Melnichuk. And now it's Doug Wilson, what are you doing? Like, a little too hot and cold for my liking there.
All right. Let me get to the... Go ahead. Sorry. Go ahead.
I want to mention one thing with Adin Hill too, because the whole second round pick is too much and all that. And again, my tweet kind of sums up my thoughts on that. But another thing is, Adin Hill's a former third round pick, so you're only trading up one round, trading a second round pick. You're moving up one round to get 6 years worth of development out of this guy. So, to me, that's fine. Again, to everything else Ian brought up, I think excellent points, though. Like, there is definitely buyer beware on this, but I think the trade was necessary, and the Sharks have a new young goalie who can push for time right now, and hopefully push Jones out of the way altogether.
Yeah, I mean, let's see where the other shoe falls, because I can't really make a final say on this until I know what that other shoe dropping is. So stay tuned, because we'll obviously talk about it when it happens. Obviously, so we are now going to talk about the expansion draft. So let's take a look at the Sharks protected list. The Sharks protected list consists of forwards Rudolph Balcers, Logan Couture, Jonathan Dahlin, Tomas Hertl, Evander Kane, Kevin Labanc, Timo Meier only once, for those that caught that on my on my Twitter. The defensemen are Brent Burns, Erik Karlsson, Mark-Edouard Vlasic. The goaltender is the newly acquired Adin Hill. Before I get to the Who's Exposed, I have a couple of things I guess I want to ask, because I know it's going to come up in the chat. Are you guys surprised that the Sharks didn't dangle any money, considering that they have a few little salary cap log jams in there?
I mean, they can dangle the money all they want, but why would Seattle take it? And that opens a whole nother conversation where, and there were a lot of people replying, to Kevin Kurz earlier this morning saying, well, why didn't they expose Burns? Why didn't they expose Jones? It's like, okay, exposing the player, that doesn't mean they're gone. Like, if that was the case, like, you expose everybody.
Right.
Like, so I don't know. I thought that killed me. I mean, I feel like it would have been, the Sharks are already in a position where they need to be calculated with their future assets, either using them or trading them for more ready future assets, like the Adin Hill trade. So to give up what it would cost to get Seattle to take one of these contracts, it's just not worth it, no matter what. In my opinion, anyway.
Anything you want to add to that, Kevin?
Nope.
I think
agreed.
I will add this. The only contracts that I think you would want to get out from under aren't ones that you could have exposed anyway. Because to me, I'm not
movement.
exposing one of those forwards. The only guy that I would remotely, I might even throw Seattle a sweetener to take is Marc-Edouard Vlasic.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't going to waive. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, say what you want about Burns and Karlsson. Like, they still give you something.
Yeah.
It's not what you need.
And I still think
I
still think someone will, you could get assets for Burns. You could get assets for Evander Kane. You could get us assets for Logan Couture. You'd have a hard time getting something for Marc-Edouard Vlasic at this point.
Yeah. It's gonna be that Andrew Ladd trade times 10.
Yeah. So obviously the guys that are available for the Kraken are Ryan Donato, and obviously some of these guys are UFAs or RFAs, but I'm not going to specify here. Curtis Gabriel, Dylan Gambrell, Jaden Halbigowatz, Maxim Lutunov, Patrick Marleau, Matt Nieto, Marcus Sorensen, Alexander True, Martin Jones obviously in goal, Christian Jaros, Nicholas Milosh, Jacob Middleton, Greg Pastrin, and Radim Shimmick on the blue line. Are you guys, I guess my question here is there any, out of these guys that are available, would you guys, because this was asked in the chat also, would you guys put a sweetener to put Seattle on any of these players?
No.
I don't think the Sharks have the assets to be throwing around sweeteners for anything. I do understand the urgency of getting rid of some of these contracts, but the bottom line is the types of sweeteners that Seattle wants is not remotely close to what the Sharks can afford to give up, both in terms of assets and what the types of assets the Sharks need to keep in order to get through the Jones contract, get through the Vlasic contract, and things like that. Like, I don't think that helps the Sharks out whatsoever. Getting rid of them with the sweeteners or keeping them. I think the Sharks are in no man's land regarding this. So I think you just have to stay the course and hope a few things figure themselves out. Again, Adin Hill comes in, maybe a couple of other free agents, but we're also talking about helping a divisional rival in Seattle out with giving them sweeteners. Like,
yeah,
all they'll probably end up doing is just flipping Vlasic or buying now Jones or whatever. Like Seattle is in the driver's seat 100% on this. So the Sharks, I just don't think the price is worth it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't think that there's nothing here. Like, there's nothing on this list that to me says, like, I'm not losing sleep over any of these guys getting taken. You take Dylan Gambrell. Oh no, you took our fourth line center. Like, I can't find another fourth line center. No problem. Big deal. They take Ryan Donato. Ryan Donato's probably not getting qualified anyway. Right? Like, the Sharks weren't going to qualify Donato anyway. So maybe they don't qualify him, and maybe, Doug Wilson is ruthless. So maybe, like, if he doesn't get taken, maybe he doesn't get qualified and he comes back for a really cheap deal. But I mean, he's not going to get what he gets qualified for. I mean, and then, Alex True or any of the other guys, like, Radim Shimmick is the only guy cap wise that I think Seattle might sniff at. And with that injury history, I want nothing to do with that. I think there's better defensemen available in the expansion draft that are probably more cost effective.
Exactly that. There are much better defensemen than Radim Shimmick without the baggage, with the injury history and stuff that are available. So that's why I picked Seattle and have been saying they'll take Alex True from the Sharks, because you pick up a young 23-year-old forward, not a lot of upside, but you already know Gambrell's a guy. Yeah. You already know Nieto's a guy, a good defensive forward, but Seattle's going to have plenty of defensive forwards to pick from. So go with it's kind of like the Adin Hill thing. He hasn't proven he can't play in the NHL yet. Mm-hmm. So to me, Seattle just takes like Alex True, goes with a young guy, inexpensive, and if he doesn't work out, whatever, no sweat on there. AJ brought up in the chat, like, it's like it's like David Schlemko, how the Sharks lost David Schlemko. Oh, big deal to Vegas. One thing that Doug Wilson isn't getting credit of, I don't know if it's a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how the Sharks were situated in each year's, maybe a little bit of luck, but the Sharks definitely are one of the worst affected or least affected teams by both expansion drafts around the league.
I just think you mentioned Alex True, Kevin, and I think what people tend to forget is, the Kraken, they have to pick 30 players. Obviously, they're one. Vegas is not involved, so they have to pick 30 players. When you're playing a game in the NHL, you can only have 20 guys wearing a uniform. That's 10 players. Exactly. No, that's what I'm saying. And so you're going to need healthy scratch guys. You're going to need guys for, the Palm Springs Hockey Club. Maybe Alexander True is one of those guys where you say, you know what? Maybe he makes the NHL, maybe he doesn't. Worst case scenario, he fills out our farm team.
Yeah, he goes to Charlotte until they move to Palm Springs, right? Because it's Charlotte for the next year. Yeah. All right. So obviously, everyone's been having fun with the mock draft simulator, and we definitely had our fun as well. I am going to start here with Mr. Kevin Lacey's team. Kevin, I'm going to put your team up on the screen, and you are going to give us a rundown on maybe just if you want to touch on why you picked certain guys. Go ahead.
Okie dokie. So, if you guys are watching on the screen right now, you can see what my team is. Certainly a different team than what I posted on my Twitter account last night before the lists came out. I wanted to kind of do a pre and a post. The one consistency that I had is that Vladimir Tarasenko was available regardless. He was a guy that I figured St. Louis would leave exposed no matter what, even before the trade demands, just because of his injury history and salary and everything like that. And so Vladimir Tarasenko is a guy that I think even though he does have that injury history, and Vince Dunn being dangled by St. Louis, that was like my main point of contention for myself was Vince Dunn or Vladimir Tarasenko, defense or offense here. And I went with Tarasenko because snipers don't grow on trees. Neither do young offensive mobile defensemen. However, I mean, think about this. If Tarasenko was to go to another team, and then Seattle, who I think is going to have a tough time generating scoring from the forwards, what's that trade cost going to be for Seattle to get a guy like Tarasenko?
Let me stop you for a second, because I realized there is audio. So let me read off your roster here quick, and then I'll let you continue.
Well, I was gonna get to that,
okay.
But I wanted to lead off with Tarasenko there. Yep. So, but to round out my roster, and I'm only gonna go through the big names here for those of you on the audio, but I do have Josh Bailey. Former Shark Chris Tierney. There's going to be a lot of former Sharks on here. I believe I have 8 in total, and that was not by design, and I guess that shows Teal Tinted Glasses for the win.
There you go.
It really is. But yeah, Josh Bailey from the Islanders and Chris Tierney. I also have Calle Jarnkrok from Nashville. Then I do have quite a few younger forwards. I mentioned Alex True, Tyler Benson, who's been great for Bakersfield the last few years, who I cannot believe Edmonton left exposed, because apparently Zach Kassian and Josh Archibald are more important than Cooper Marody and Tyler Benson. I do not understand that. But there are some other big name forwards. I mentioned Yanni Gourde earlier in the show. Jonas Donskoy got exposed because Colorado did some weird things with their. I couldn't believe they protected Burakovsky in that contract. But the other forward name I want to bring up is Frank Vetrano, who is a Florida Panther. Now, we know that Florida is essentially going to be giving up Chris Driedger to Seattle, the goalie. So Florida can't possibly lose Frank Vetrano to to Seattle. However, for me, when you look down on the list and you see Carey Price available as a goalie for Montreal, and let's knock off the so-called knee injury that got reported here this evening by the Montreal media, because I think that's Montreal going, oops, we didn't know you'd actually consider taking Carey Price in expansion. We gotta come up with some BS here. I think you see Carey Price and say, Chris Driedger as our franchise goalie, or Carey Price, who grew up in the WHL, has his ties, his family out there, like big ticket, big money name, one of the best goalies in NHL history. Like, that's the guy you go. So, even though we pretty much know Driedger's there, I say go. You knock him out of the way. Frank Vetrano as a scoring forward there, and you get Carey Price anyway. On defense, I think their defense is stacked. This is really where Ron Francis likes to build out his teams anyway. He did it with Carolina. I do have Shane Gostisbehere, which Philadelphia will love them long time for that, because they have really, really wanted to get rid of him for a long time. But he's kind of the offensive go-to because Tarasenko is on the team. They obviously don't get Vince Dunn. You bring in Gostisbehere for the offensive ability. Brendan Dillon, former Seattle Thunderbirds, on there, and he's paired with Dylan DeMello. Dilly back now with Seattle. And then Travis Dermott, I mentioned. I think that's the guy who they need to get from Toronto. Jeremy Lauzon, another defensive defenseman, and then some really good young defensive talent in Cale Clegg, Jake Bean, because Carolina, oh boy, Morgan Geekie or Jake Bean, who do you pick there? I went with Jake Bean. How could you not? Although Jerk did go the other route, so I will be asking him on that. And then Josh Maher is another really good young defenseman who Anaheim is forced to let go. So that's my pick. And of course, Josef Kozhinash really gets that Mike Hoffman kind of treatment in Arizona. He gets taken because Arizona has pretty much no one else worth taking because their minor league system sucked this year. So Josef Kozhinash goes to Seattle, but he's the third string goalie because Kaapo Kähkönen inexplicably was also exposed by Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm gonna post these on the website as well. But I dig it. I think there's there's a lot obviously on the list that I like. A lot of things I think that I did too, but there's definitely a lot there. Jerk, I'm gonna let you go next. Go ahead, my friend.
We may have lost Jerk for a moment.
No, I'm still here. I just muted myself. I didn't want to interrupt Kevin. So there were a couple different ways I was thinking about this. You know, I wanted to put together a competitive team while also obviously navigating the salary cap, but keeping guys, like trying to blend everything, get some young players, get some veteran players, some guys who, you know, the guys in the middle in their primes will be around for a while, you know. And so I'll go goaltending. Now, you may look at the goaltending and you think, yikes, you want to be a competitive team with that? But I agree with Kevin, what he said about Josef Kozhinash. I mean, he's the third goalie, obviously. He can be the goalie for the Palm Springs Hockey Club, worst case scenario. Kaapo Kähkönen being exposed, I mean, what a tasty treat that was. I don't know what Minnesota is doing. And then Chris Driedger, only because it's kind of the worst kept secret that he's going there anyway, so I figured I would just play ball on that, you know, that part. On the defense, you know, I kind of have the same mindset as Kevin, where I think a new environment for Shane Gostisbehere, I think, would do him wonders. I mean, he's got talent, and you'll see a lot of that. There's, with my list, there's a couple guys where it's like new city, hopefully gets the juices rolling a little bit more. Like guys like Shane Gostisbehere, Will Butcher comes to mind, Marcus Pettersson, who I think is a good defenseman, but has kind of fallen, you know, seems to have fallen by the wayside in Pittsburgh a little bit. So there's no real studs on the blue line, but I think all three of those guys, and then obviously Dylan DeMello to round it out, you know, I just think those guys, they're good, reliable defensemen. They can play 20 minutes a night. They'll do everything you need to do. Block shots, stick check, blah, 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 all that good stuff. And wanting to get some good young guys, that's why you see like a Lucas Johansson, a Dennis Chalowski, Kale Clegg, Lozon. Like these are guys who should be pushing for NHL spots now, but they can also Lozon not really because he's an NHL defenseman, but specifically Clegg, Chalowski, Johansson, even Shillington. Like these are guys who, if they don't work out, they can go to your farm club because you don't like, you don't want your AHL team to just be loners from everybody else. You want to have some form of an imprint there. And then for the forwards, I think I maybe went a little too crazy with the talent that's there, but same kind of thing. Duchesne, Tarasenko, Henrique, Drouin, Domi. Like these are guys who I think get them a new city, new line mates, new systems, new everything. Maybe you can get some things cooking. And I think specifically Matt Duchesne. I think Matt Duchesne is a hell of a player, and he just ended up in Nashville, which is where offense goes to die, as we say on this show. And then you get some. I mean, I have to say, Kevin, you gotta taking Jared McCann, easy decision. Even aside from the fact of how much I love this player, easy decision. So, but guys like McCann, Donskoy, Ryan Donato, these are guys who they're kind of middle of the road, like maybe third line guys, but in an injury situation, power play, you want to switch it up. There's a lot of flexibility with the roster. You can move them around and sort of see what works and what doesn't. And obviously there are more NHL players than NHL spots. So the idea is maybe you trade some for futures, or maybe you can pluck 3, 4, 5 of these pieces along with some draft picks. Maybe you swing for like a Jack Eichel. That's just a random thought I had. But then, again, keeping with the theme, filling out a farm team, getting some young players, Vitaly Abramov, Cole Lind, Geeky, Gaudette, these guys, like, they should be pushing for NHL spots, but if they don't, stash them on the farm. And it's good to have, obviously the NHL team, they win you championships, they make you money, but you want to have a good system top to bottom, and that includes your farm team. So that's kind of, I sort of had like 8 different schools of thoughts when picking this team, as you can see. So yeah, I think the Pacific Division is not really super competitive this year, so that's why I'm leaning more towards going after some established players, specifically at forward, but also, you don't want to get into a situation where it's like you don't. At least I don't feel that you want that turnover. Like you want to be like, yeah, this is our team, and we're sticking with them, and these are going to be the guys who are going to be here for, I don't know, 3 to 5 years, as opposed to, yeah, we got all these guys, like Vegas, we got all these guys, and now they're all gone. So that's kind of where I was going with it.
I dig it. All right, I am going to throw up mine now. I'm going to say mine. I did have to rush a little bit more than I wanted to get this done, just because I was in the car a lot of the day. I have a few things here. I kind of, same with Jerk, I have Ryan Johansson on my list for kind of the same reason. I feel like he's a guy who in a different situation should do really well. And I feel like I like Ryan Johansson a little more than I like Matt Duchesne, but it was kind of between the two of them. I really like Jordan Eberle. I think he's a guy who would fit really well. Tarasenko, obviously, I took because I think him being available, again, like you're going to have decent, this team's going to have decent offensive prowess, I think, based on what's available. Because, again, you look at the guys that are available, and we haven't even gotten into the take this guy, so I don't, take this guy and this guy, please. Like, we haven't even got to that stupidity yet. Again, I got a few things where I've got a few guys that are there to kind of just be, if they work out, great. If they don't, not a big deal. I also like Jared McCann. I grabbed Michael Bunting for that reason off Arizona. I think Michael Bunting's a guy in Arizona I think flies a little bit under the radar. I also went Mark Giordano. I think the thing with this team that I picked is that with the players available, they have a chance to really just come out of the gate hard in a really crappy Pacific Division, right? But I still think if you look at like the way a lot of these guys are signed and how, they're not, a lot of these guys aren't signed for very long. So you can kind of have your cake and eat it too. You can come out of the gate really hard while still picking up capital and being good long term. I did go, the hardest thing was goaltending, right? So I did pick Carey Price now, but when I picked Carey Price, I didn't hear about the knee injury. I'm not so sure. Like, again,
I call bull.
yeah, and you know what? Here's the thing that surprises me about that a little bit. Like, I'm surprised that Montreal was that upset over the prospect of losing Jake Allen. Because Jake Allen, I mean, I'm sure he's a serviceable backup, but like Jake Allen's the guy you want to protect. Is he going to be the guy you put in a big game? I don't want Jake Allen anywhere near a big game.
Jake Allen played 0 seconds of the playoffs this year.
Right. And then I also took Heiskanen and I took Driedger as well. And the reason why I took all three of those guys is because, again, you can take players in the draft and flip them for assets. Someone's going to give you assets for one of those two guys. So either you have a tandem of Price and Heiskanen or Price and Driedger. Like, how do you go wrong there? I looked at some of the other goalies available. I just think that there's a lot of risk there. Like, I know Ben Bishop's available, but like that injury history terrifies me. Obviously this, Carey Price, again, the rumor injury, obviously that's problematic, but I still think like Carey Price isn't as great as, like he hasn't had great seasons, but he was the main reason. Like if Montreal came closer in that Stanley Cup final, he's picking up Conn Smythe votes, even as the loser, if Montreal fares a little better against Tampa. And so I don't know. It's interesting. Definitely. Like it's hard. I was really struggling with the cap because I as you see, I do have a lot of cap on here, and I think that even I'm a little over, but there's a lot to like here. Like I've got Madison Bowie, I've got Cal Foote, so there's definitely guys there that I think could, still develop into something. I really like Cal Foote. Madison Bowie, maybe not, but Cal Foote's a guy who could definitely come in and replace some of these guys as they go. Mark Giordano, I think, has a big ticket, but again, if you want to come out of the gate hard like Vegas did, I'm not scared of 1 year of Mark Giordano. Like, to me, that's the way I would go. I don't know. Any thoughts, guys?
I wanted to ask you, how much salary did your teams build up? Because mine, I think, only ended up being about 59 million. But like, I was listening to, as I mentioned, the Talking Puck podcast before this, and it's interesting because the three of us all have different teams. And Mike Haynes and Tom Callahan both have completely different teams. So this is going to go any which way, everyone. Like,
sure.
Seattle's probably going to have a completely different team than what we all have. But
AO has a really good question.
They struggled with the cap.
So yeah, I was a little bit over the cap, but there's pending UFAs and RFAs, right? So, I'm over the cap, but until free agency.
Sure.
That I'm exactly the same way, and even then, I'm less than 2 million over the cap. But same thing. Once you get to free agency,
I think once free agency rolls over, I think I'm at 70 million in cap spent. But again, you're gonna flip guys for assets. You're gonna have guys like I took Ryan Donato from the Sharks because that's been my play the whole time. But like I said earlier, that's a guy that you don't qualify and then you circle back to and offer him less. And if he doesn't, and if he's not there, big deal.
That's true. And they have the extra days to be able to negotiate that before they even hit the open market.
Yeah.
Being qualified. So.
So I'm gonna post these on the website tealtintedglasses.com when we do the post. I'm gonna have all these in there so that you guys, if you want to look at the list, if you're listening only on the audio, just to save me from reading off 3 lists. We do have a question in the chat. AO asking, and I'm gonna ask each of you the same question. From the teams you made, who are your captains? And I'm gonna add who are your alternates.
Okay. I'll start. My captain's Brendan Dillon. I know. The whole Seattle thing, I mean, it worked for Derek England in Vegas, even though he never had the C, which made no sense to me whatsoever. But I think Brendan Dillon's your captain with the Kraken with my roster. Your alternates, Josh Bailey's got to be in there. And then, I don't know about a second alternate. Can I just get by with one?
Yeah, that's fine.
All right.
So my captain is Jared McCann. No, I'm just kidding.
Wow.
You know what? I am. Man, that's an excellent question. I'm not doing a captain. I'm doing 3 alternates.
Okay.
Oh, okay.
Dylan DeMello, Adam Henrique, and Blake Como.
Now, see, with your Henrique pick, so I think Henrique absolutely should be getting an A, and I even considered him for my roster. My deterrent for Henrique was kind of like a few of the guys that you picked, like Donato, a guy probably does not get qualified. Dominic Cahoon probably doesn't get qualified. Henrique was on waivers 3 times last season. But the thing is, Henrique was one of the best Ducks last season. So he definitely has the talent, and it's all just a money thing. Seattle having the cap space, I could see Adam Henrique going in there, and I think that would be a good play for them. So him being a leader on that team, I'm fully behind that.
I would also go the 3 alternate route. Because I don't know who's going to be on my team past year. I'd have to go back and look at my list to see who's actually going to be here long term. At first glance, I'd probably make Giordano my captain, but I don't think he's here beyond the first year. So does that make sense? I don't know. But I like if I would probably go the 3 alternate route and then see who ends up sticking and then go from there. I would go Mark Giordano, Brendan Dillon, Jordan Eberle.
I think that question all depends on the amount of leadership and veterans that each team has. Like, I went with a really young team, so I mean, you guys have some more proven leaders on your squads than I do. So yeah, it all depends. One thing I just noticed on your list, Ian, you have Michael Bunting. The Coyotes exposed Michael Bunting.
Yeah,
the reason I asked this is because if they did, I kind of want to make a change on my because I'm like if that's the case, then the Kraken should take Michael Bunting, not Kozhinash, and then what you do is instead of Will Borgen from the Sabres, you take Dustin Tokarski, who's the only player under contract to maintain the 20 contracts that Seattle does.
Right.
You take him as a contract only and then just let him go off into the sunset. See, you guys, and I couldn't even get it in the show without considering changing my roster. That Michael Bunting was exposed. What are you? What? Well, you guys, stupid Arizona. Jeez.
Yeah, I mean Arizona, where money goes to die. Apparently.
Hey, were there? Can I ask you guys? Were there any surprises besides like Kakkonen and Price, for example? Were there any big surprises on the exposure lists for you? Like for me, I did protect Adam Henrique and let Nick Delorier walk, but apparently all those goals that Henrique scores doesn't matter for Anaheim.
I mean, Carey Price.
Yeah.
Carey Price to protect Jake Allen, like that to me is just it's asinine. Go ahead.
Kind of an under the radar surprise. I thought it was surprising to me that Nick Ritchie was exposed.
Yeah.
Only because I feel like this year on Boston he finally started to grow into the NHL player that I think everybody's been expecting him to, and he seemed to really fit well there and take positive steps. So in my head, I'm thinking, okay, Nick Ritchie's finally a player here. Yeah. And then they protect, Kevin's favorite punching bag, Trent Frederick. So I don't know.
We didn't give full explanation there. That's my follower, Nick Ritchie, should have been protected over Trent Frederick. So you're damn right. I don't think Trent Frederick's a bad hockey player, but I mean, I just think he's a guy like that. That's like protecting Dylan Gambrell. Why? Why would you do that? Like, I think Nick Ritchie absolutely should have been protected by Boston, but
Yeah, there was just like it's stuff like that, right? Like the Carey Price not being exposed doesn't really like bother me, except for you did it for Jake Allen.
yeah.
Like that's the part I can't wrap my head around. Like I understand, like getting out from under Price's contract would be nice for Montreal. Although again, like, do you realize how you got to the Stanley Cup final? But I digress. I mean, I was surprised that I was also surprised that I think like I expected one of Ryan Johansson or Matt Duchene to get exposed. I was surprised both got exposed. Like I was surprised Nashville went 5 defensemen.
Yeah.
I thought it was epic.
It was epic, but it surprised me.
Someone tweeted at me last night saying, why are you leaving Carrier exposed? Nashville's taking 5 defensemen. And I was like, I guess you could take 5 defensemen. And then they actually did it. But yeah, they protected Tanner Jeannot and Luke Cunnin over Matt Duchene and Ryan Johansson.
Yeah.
That says burn it to the ground rebuild for me, for Nashville. Like, obviously you're not going to get rid of Yossi, but that one's weird for me. What do you guys think about Matt Murray being exposed by Ottawa? Salary thing?
Yeah,
Matt Murray's
probably.
terrible.
I'm not a big Matt Murray guy, but I mean, considering what they just traded a bunch to get him, and then
Yeah.
They have like I feel like they're a team though that they're the goalie they protected is the guy you protect. Like Matt Murray's a stopgap.
Mm-hmm.
Until and that's my opinion anyway.
I won't say it was a surprise, but I thought it was very interesting that as a pending UFA, Montreal chose to protect Yoel Armia.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me wonder, like, if maybe, well, a deal in the drawer wouldn't even make sense because you would just leave him exposed then. It makes me wonder if they are grinding away to try and burying him back. But and don't get me wrong, I love Yoel Armia, but I don't know.
I don't know if Seattle takes them, can they sign him after that? I know you can't trade back.
Well, yeah, because he could.
Yeah, because he's a free agent.
He could just say, "I don't want to go to Seattle. I'll see you on July 28th."
Yeah.
So, but I don't know. I it doesn't surprise me, but I just thought it was very interesting. Like, I know people have had words about Jonathan Drouin, myself included. I still saw him getting protected, so I don't know.
I like your train of thought about Armia. Just real quick on your comment there, Ian. It's that if Seattle signs a player before a UFA before expansion, they have to pick the player.
Oh,
but
okay.
they could take Armia and then negotiate afterwards.
For sure.
There's nothing stopping that.
Okay.
But I like your thought, Hockey Jerk. But for me, it was Philip Deneau. I had them protecting Philip Deneau for the exact same reason. I mean, a key member of that forward group. Does a little bit of everything, and I thought he'd be protected as a UFA to give them negotiation rights, but it was Armia that they decided to go the same route with. So,
All right, so we got to start wrapping this up. Okay, go ahead.
One more. I'm sorry.
Yep.
One
Nope,
more
that's okay.
thing. I mean, with Eberle and Josh Bailey, there was no way you were gonna. Well, actually, yes, there was. Why the hell are the Islanders protecting Clutterbuck and Matt Martin as opposed to Eberle and Bailey? It makes zero sense to me because, and I don't remember what show it was. It was either one show ago or 2 shows ago. I said maybe Josh Bailey gets exposed or traded, and Kevin said no. Josh Bailey's
he's the straw that stirs that drink.
Mhm.
Why would you ever do that?
He said Josh Bailey is too important to that team, and I was like, damn, okay, Kevin, you're right. I changed my mind, and then he's exposed, and I'm kind of like, what is you doing, Seattle or New York Islanders?
That's the entire reason why I had Seattle take him. I'm like, what?
Yeah.
So you're talking about surprises. that was a surprise the more that I think about it.
That was a surprise.
All right, so I just want to see. I was gonna scan the chat quick just to make sure.
Rob Iman asked about Holtby going to Seattle, and this is not to pile on Rob at all, because Rob brings up a point that a lot of people have brought up, in that it seems like Seattle is going with Treager and Holtby, and that seems like a foregone conclusion. Why Holtby? Like, I don't understand that, but that seems to be what's going to happen. Why Holtby though? Silence. Okay, that's fine. We have no idea. I'm just I don't understand it.
Unless he can turn into the goalie he was 3 years ago, but there's no indication that he can.
Yeah.
I don't know.
All right. I'm gonna wrap this up so we can take this home. So obviously, long show, but a lot happened this week. So I feel like this is the one show we actually earned the length. We'll definitely next time we come on, we'll definitely do some of the stuff that we normally do, as well as talk about all this stuff that's still to come. But obviously, right here on Teal Town USA, we have a bunch of content coming up. Obviously, the expansion draft is Wednesday, and I'm sure that there will be a show after that, just breaking down what happened and getting to know our new enemy in the Seattle Kraken, and prognostications on how they're going to do. The draft is this weekend, so there will definitely be content there. I'm assuming on both days of the draft. I'm sure we will. I know Pekka was mentioning possibly being live while the Sharks pick. I think that'd be super cool, but either way, there'll definitely be a show Friday night, and I'm sure we will do a show on Saturday to recap the rest of the draft. So definitely make sure that if you're not subscribed, subscribe, hit the bell, hit the likes, leave a comment in the chat. If you ever have anything, any comments about the show, leave us a comment in the chat. Helps us with the algorithm, obviously, and all that cool stuff. So that is it for us tonight. We appreciate all you guys for joining us. Big crowd watching tonight, and we always appreciate that. So obviously, Kevin Lacey, any final thoughts?
My final thoughts are, we did this same exact show for the Las Vegas Golden Knights. And at the time, we said, boy, look at all these names we didn't expect to be available. So we built our lists, and then when Vegas drafted their team, we went, how did they not take this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy, this guy? How do they just leave those guys on the board? Well, that Vegas Golden Knights team went to the Stanley Cup Finals that year. So, no matter what we have predicted here tonight, who knows? Tarasenko might not be taken. Carey Price might not be taken. Jared McCann might not be taken, although Jerk will say, screw you.
I'm going to claim him if Seattle doesn't.
But I'm very curious to hear how it goes. And then if Seattle ends up taking a bunch of guys that leave us scratching our heads, at the same time, we did it a few years ago, and it turned out to work out well for them. I do trust Ron Francis. So, again, I'm ready to root for the Kraken. I just hope their fans are a little bit nicer than Vegas's are. I'm at Kevin Lacey 22 on Twitter. Thanks for watching.
Hockey Jerk.
I am at hockey_jerk on Twitter. Unrelated, last week was a big week for me. I moved, and I finally have the Jerk podcast studio version 3.0 set up. So yeah, y'all didn't see a difference. For me, big difference. I quite enjoyed it. And I enjoyed talking to these guys. We talk for too long? Probably, but it's a damn good conversation, and I wouldn't give it up for anything. So, it's our favorite time of the year. We're going to keep doing things, obviously, expansion draft, entry draft, free agency. I know we're all pretty in love with the idea of the Know Your Enemy segment. That's going to be something we're going to be doing a lot. So fear not, the summer months are hard for hockey fans, and that's why you have us.
Yeah, I can't promise that the rest of the summer is going to be as exciting as this week those, but the content definitely on Teal Tinted Glasses will keep coming. I hope that I had enough energy today. I was in the car all day. I'm pretty exhausted at this point. I'm not going to lie. But it was awesome, getting home and getting on to do this pretty much, getting home, being home for a few hours and then coming on and doing this podcast. And again, seeing how many people are watching live right now, it's fantastic. And for those that are, catching this on the audio, we obviously appreciate you as well. Again, if you ever have anything that you want us to talk about, you can hit us up in our Discord channel. You can also DM me at Ian Blogs Hockey. I'd be happy to, take your thoughts of what you'd like us to talk about, and we would definitely like to talk about the things that you want us to talk about, as well as the things that we like to talk about. That makes sense. I don't know. I'm rambling now. So that is it. I appreciate everyone being here, and I hope that you all have a fantastic evening, and I hope you all enjoyed the show, and we will see you the next time we go live. Thank you, and good night.